You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 19 and a half. This podcast is dedicated to circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to learn about all the possibilities this amazing art form has to offer. Hey friends, fans, and enemies, I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. Today's episode is the second part of my interview with Veronica Blair. If you haven't listened to part one, go back and listen first because we jump right in this episode. If you're a Patreon, you're listening to this episode early. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for your support. I very much appreciate it. You guys keep the lights on around here. For the rest of you, go to www.patreon.com/theartistathlete to become a Patreon. Patreons get early access to episodes, as well as cool artist athlete swag. What do Patreons pay for? Well, you keep this podcast going. And right now what that means is that I'm talking very fast into this microphone because my laptop battery is about to die. And for some reason, my laptop battery won't hold a charge. So I have to take it in and get it repaired, which means that I probably will have to drop at least $100 on that. Other expenses for this podcast include paying a sound editor, which is around $350 a month. I have a hosting service on Libsyn, which is amazing. They give me all my stats. Every week I can check in and see that over 400 people are downloading episodes of the Artist Athlete podcast every Monday. And those downloads continue throughout the week. I can see where in the world people are downloading from and what platform they're using. They're $50 a month. So right there, that's about $500. And that's not counting the time and energy that I put into typing up these questions, finding these amazing people to interview, and recording intros like this. So again, www.patreon.com/theartistathlete. You can give as little as $1. You can give as much as $500. I'll take it all and use it for good. I promise. But I have to talk fast because my battery is about to die. So about Veronica. After 5 years of performing with UniverSOUL, Veronica accepted a job in Osaka, Japan, and noticed that her and her coworkers' skin color directly affected the roles that they were cast in. This experience with colorism, along with an encounter with an elderly gentleman in Sarasota, inspired an investigation of the history of people of color in American circus. This ultimately led to her creating an ongoing work called the Uncle Junior Project. And that's what this interview is about today. For sensitive listeners, there is one word used in the interview today that has been edited in accordance with Apple Music guidelines. Here's the second part of my interview with Veronica Blair.
So I was, at this point, by the time I'm in Japan, I'm just winging it. But like, there was Africa, which I was a shoo-in for, and I got that contract immediately. And I don't know what happened like in the early 2000s, but shows featuring people of African descent or Africans was just like so popular. And Dragon had just started, and they were looking for like Ethiopians and Africans to to open the show in Macau. So we were like a hot thing. But at the time, as far as African American aerialists, it was just Susan and I really like out there and really performing at a high level. It didn't dawn on me that because of the shows that I was being cast in, that, you know, obviously I'm Black and they're looking to cast Black people, but it wasn't until like after my experience working for those shows where I was like, oh, like you're casting me because I am a Black person, a Black woman, or because I'm an attractive woman for you. So it wasn't until after those experiences I started realizing like, wow, like I'm literally being cast in this show as a lion because of my dark skin. Like they wanted African Americans. And it didn't just stop there. Like all the birds and butterflies in the show were Russian. All of the fish were Japanese, and the monkeys were Chinese. So we had
that is
like
some shady casting.
So, but this was like, I've done like a lot of shows and like a lot of corporate events and stuff like that. But this is the first time where it was just like blatantly like just kind of like, and Japanese people are so beautifully just like straight to the point. Like, well, yeah.
Right, well, because like culturally, like they don't have all of the baggage that say we have in the U.S., right?
And it doesn't come from a place of like, well, this is what is beautiful. This is what it's coming from a place of like, this is what we know.
Yeah.
So we did like a Christmas show as well, and there was town people and there was angels, and the darker skinned people, like Japanese people, it didn't matter who you were. You were a townsperson, and all of the angels had to be like silky, milky white skin, and it didn't matter if you're Russian or Japanese or whatever you were. You just had to have a certain skin tone.
That was the reference that they had
for the angels, and so all of us darker skin, all like anything from Olive on, we were like in the town dancing. So it was just like, and it's not done like that because in a malicious way. There's not any kind of like racist intent there. It is just like, it's purely just like, well, this is how it is, right?
Yeah, sure.
So that's when I really like saw it in my face. And then later it was more, I literally was on a show where a guy just searched the internet and I got cast just from YouTube. And I was like, look, there's a lot of aerial videos on YouTube, and I don't post my good videos on YouTube. I post the videos that are like far away, and like, cause that was back in the day, like when YouTube first, like YouTube is only like 10 years old. So that was a way of kind of protecting your work, but like kind of promoting yourself. And I was like, dude, I can't just put like my act. So I never put anything current. I never put anything like close up. I was like, there's a lot of videos out there. Like, why are you like casting me of like all people? And he literally took his finger and like drew a circle around my face. And I was like, because of my face? And he was like, yeah. He was like, you're beautiful.
You
and
are
like,
so beautiful.
Thank you. But like as an artist,
so that's
like,
how you make it as a professional aerialist, guys. Be beautiful like Veronica Blair.
That is not how you make it. Well, I'm just saying. No, that is not. You have to work super, super hard and
and also be beautiful.
Be a credible, hardworking person.
So what was the moment? So I want to talk about Uncle Junior Project for sure.
Yeah.
There was UniverSOUL. There was this experience with colorism, being in Japan, living that life. And then when did the Uncle Junior Project come in?
The Uncle Junior Project came in like 2010.
Okay.
Actually, yeah, 2010.
Okay.
And that was the year that Emanuel, Uncle Junior Ruffin, died. He died in September of 2010. And I don't know if you remember this, but at the time, MySpace was kind of like fading out and like Facebook was becoming big, but MySpace was still there, and there was a circus space.
What? Like a social media platform called Circus Space?
Modeled after MySpace.
Oh my God, is it still around?
No, they like lost funding and like couldn't maintain it.
Okay.
But there was
it San Francisco based as well?
No, it was based. A guy in Florida kind of like started it.
Wow.
And it was like legit.
Wow.
Like a real like platform. Like circus people were on it, and you could like chat and you could like show pictures and advertise, and it was like great. But this platform was so incredible at the time that when this man died, there was an outpour of like there was like a bulletin board. So it was like posted that he had passed, and there was his obituary and everything. And people were writing on this thread about how
And this
amazing.
is Emanuel Ruffin when he died.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not the guy who created...
Not the guy.
I'm sorry, I'm like so blown away from like... I'm like, maybe the artist athlete should have like a social media... like.
Maybe
how cool would that be? Because I hate right now that it's all just like Facebook groups. It's like international perform. Like, what if we had our own?
Yes. Maybe even Reddit. I don't know. Reddit is kind of, but this one.
I don't go on Reddit.
MySpace.
I try to stay away from Reddit.
It's a black hole.
Yeah. I've been told the first rule of Reddit is don't go on Reddit. So.
Yes. And there's
I go on it for other things,
group?
but not Aerial.
Oh,
yeah. No, I don't go on the Aerial
group.
Don't go
to the Aerial group because I'm like,
I bet I'm going to get so much hate on the Aerial.
Please don't do that. That is dangerous. Don't do it. I have been up responding to all kinds of stuff on there. But Yeah, what was I? Anyway, circus space. So Emanuel Junior Ruffin passed, and there was this outpouring of like all these beautiful, like well-written like paragraphs about him, and I noticed that Cedric Walker like wrote this open letter and talking about like how instrumental he was to helping to get UniverSOUL Circus started. And I was like, what? And I was like, who is Emanuel Junior Ruffin? So I like Googled him, and there was a write-up about him in a Florida newspaper. And I saw a picture of him, and I stared at him, and I read the letter that Cedric Walker wrote. And I looked at him, I was like, that old guy. That's that old guy. So.
What old guy? Like, had this person,
exactly.
Like, did he buy you a burger too or
no,
something?
No, he didn't buy me anything.
That's why I remember him. You're shipping that guy.
But when I was training that first year in Sarasota, Florida with Lenorma Fox at Circus Sarasota in the tent, he was in a wheelchair and he had a circus accident with a wagon wheel. So his foot was like was blown up and looked kind of like an elephant foot, but he was like in a wheelchair. And that's the first time that I met him when I was 18 and I was in training to join UniverSOUL Circus. Okay. And they were like, this is Emanuel, or they call him Manuel. And he was like, oh, hey, how you doing? And then so, like, I gave him a hug, but I gave him one of those, like, church lady hugs. Like, you don't want to be, like, body to body. You just, like, get, like,
keep the Holy Spirit between you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
for me, as an 18-year-old, like, young woman, I was just like, oh, crusty old guy. But every time he came around, people, like, treated him a certain way, like a nice, like respectful way. And I noticed that, but I was like, ooh, crusty old guy. And then every time we were in Florida with the UniverSOUL Circus, so like for 5-6 years, when we were in Florida, he would roll up. Like someone would bring him to the circus. And at the time I worked with the King Charles Unicycle Troupe, which is this amazing troupe, one of the first black acts on Ringling ever. They have an incredible story. But I was performing with them, and they were like, yo, V, Uncle Junior here. Yo, V, you gotta meet Uncle Junior, yo, because they're all from New York. And then I was like, okay. And then I would go running, like, out of the tent or from my dressing room, and it'd be the old crusty guy in the wheelchair. And I'd be like, oh, hey, how you doing? He was like, and he'd be like, yeah, I remember you. He was like, you're doing really well. Like, he would always, like, compliment me and like say like, oh, I really like you're growing a lot, like you're doing. Like he would just smile, and he had the most incredible smile, no teeth, incredible smile. And I would just like, me and my young self, I wrote him off as just the old crusty guy.
So who was he?
So who is Uncle Junior? He was a man that was super instrumental in the American circus. He started out in the 40s, at 14 years old. He just went and he went to Clyde Beatty Circus, and he was just standing there watching Clyde Beatty train the tigers and work with his cats and stuff like that. And every day he would just go and watch. He was fascinated by it. His grandma gave him permission to just go to the circus, so he just went and watched. And then magically Clyde Beatty took him on as a cage boy, so basically a human pooper scooper, and
he'd clean the cages for like the big cats. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And he taught Uncle Junior, but basically Junior had to get permission from his grandmother, and his grandmother gave him permission to travel with the circus, and so Clyde Beatty took him on under his wing. So he started as a cage boy, which is where anyone that works with cats, that's where they start. And he trained them on how to like take care of tigers and then elephants, and like really like from birth to adulthood, and how to train them. And he ended up presenting a tiger act. But at the time, because of segregation, we're talking about the 40s and 50s, traveling through the Deep South, they changed his name and they marketed him as an African prince. Because back in the day, like if you were like, that African is exotic,
right?
You know? But being an African American, you're just like, oh,
yeah. So, I was actually thinking about this when you were talking about like your experience in France too, because I do know that there's a lot of racism there from immigrants who come from Africa.
Yeah.
But if you're an African American going to France.
Totally different.
Totally different, right?
Totally different. And that's
so it's funny that like dynamic. I hadn't thought of it that way, but yeah, it makes sense that it would be
he
flipped.
Was marketed as Prince Bogino.
Whoa, okay.
The African prince. It didn't work really well because when people would go up to him and talk to him after the show, he had this southern accent and it's like cover blown, you know? Like, so as a performer, that's one of the things that he went through when he like rose up the ranks and he became a performer. And then he went on to teach himself like welding, and he became tent boss and held several different positions at Circus Vargas, like kept the show running.
Wow.
And he was the train boss at Ringling, being the first African American to do that. So he made sure that he was well versed in different areas of the circus. So if you wanted a circus to run, he was your guy, and he was literally responsible for setting up the circus because he would hold 6 people's jobs. And so people would just hire him. In some cases, not all, pay him peanuts. And he would like set up the circus. And in some cases, like take care of the animals and stuff too. So his job never stopped. And like throughout his travels and like working with animals, he had been like in his experiences in the circus, he experienced a lot of prejudice and racism, even being stabbed in the head with the ice pick.
I was that's crazy.
Like that.
I was watching some of your videos this morning, and like that idea that like he would have his act, his big cat act, and people were like cheering for the cats to eat him.
Yeah, and I couldn't even imagine. The only thing that I can't even relate to that, I remember one time in Atlanta, Yo City, I was performing in UniverSOUL Circus, my Tissue debut. And at the time, the T-Pain song came that was so popular. I'm in love with a stripper.
Yeah.
Girl, I did a straddle up to do a knee hook on the silks, and the audience started singing that song and laughing.
Well, we are the strip club capital. I don't know if you know that, but
Shannon, I was heartbroken. I was like, I'm trying to give you my art, and Gerard Fasoli told me that I'm an artist, and you guys are singing about strippers. Strippers! I am not a stripper. I am opening my legs a lot, but I am not a stripper. But like that's the only audience interaction that I've ever had in my entire career. Where I left feeling like belittled, I left feeling like hypersexualized or whatever. But like this here is a man that is like doing something extraordinary, working with big cats, and people are like, get him, you know, get that, you know.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. But this man just managed to stay as positive as he could and took on so many other jobs. Wow. And in some cases, I had a talk with Lance Talbert, who was a dear friend of him, and that is a journalist that has done a lot of interviews with Junior. He just was a bit passive, and he allowed people to take advantage of him, stuff like that. And so, unfortunately, you know, like he died with not a lot of money and stuff like that. But you know, he has been honored for his contributions. I
look at even what you've done and you're doing with his work, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I was that circus space thing, and like seeing how important he was to some people, and not even knowing that the crusty old guy was responsible. It was instrumental in helping to start the circus show that I dreamed about going to as a teenager. That was incredible for me to find out. I had no idea that I was working in the show that he helped put together. So it was Cedric Walker, the exhibition. He went to Robert Houston's house, to the museum. Robert connected him with Junior because they were good friends. And Junior helped him get the tent and helped him find all the talent because of Junior's past working in the circus and knowing all of the performers of African descent, African American performers. So he was able to be like, oh, well, there's this person over here and there's this person over there, and helping. He was instrumental in helping UniverSOUL Circus those first few years. And for me to be directly affected by that and like not know it, that like did something to me, and thus the Uncle Junior project was born.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's circus physical therapist Dr. Jen Crane of Cirque Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen. Cirque Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code PODCAST at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code PODCAST. Now, back to the show.
In France, they have circus libraries at the circus schools. You go to circus library, you can research circus, and there's books on American circus, and you can see like the Dolly Jacobs and her father, Lou Jacobs, and you can, all of like American circus royalty, you can read about in these books. But what you don't find is a lot of information about African American performers. And so I just started like Googling like all the people that I knew that were pioneers, like my mentor Pamela Hernandez and her cousin Denise, who were dual satin on Ringling, King Charles Troupe, who was the first act on Ringling, all of these African-American circus acts that were pioneers, and not so like, let's say from like the late to mid 70s, not, this is kind of recent history, like.
Sure.
I started to Google them and like research them, and I got obsessed with them, obsessed with that topic, and I was like, I can't let these stories that I know go unheard or undocumented. And so Uncle Junior was the catalyst for me wanting to start the Uncle Junior project.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I was just on the website today.
Mm-hmm.
Is there more media coming? Is it going to be a feature-length film?
There is more media coming. Like I had to take a step back from the project for like a year because I literally was pimping myself out to fund it. So what I mean by that is that I was taking like cruise ship jobs, and I was taking like 3-month contracts here and there, like just kind of taking anything that I could get to fund this project. Like literally, like all of my money was going to the project, and I was feeling burnt out, and I was feeling like to make a film is really expensive, and I had no idea. Especially a documentary, which is something that goes on and on and on as the story changes and unfolds. And if you want a good quality product or, a movie or film, you have to pay for that quality. And so it was very overwhelming. But now coming back from that hiatus, I am working with a few different editors to get the interviews that I've like taken over the years, edited and put into mini documentaries. So within the next year, starting next year, what we'll do is start releasing monthly, small, like tiny biographies of African American circus performers.
That's so cool.
So I'm gonna start with the original concept that I had was to travel across America and document the stories of African American circus performers. And so what I'm gonna do is each interview just cut them and release them to the public, because that's what this project is all about. There is a feature-length documentary that we plan to do about Uncle Junior and the experience that I've had with doing this project and how I've changed, how this process has changed me. And we do want to do that as well. So there will also be a feature as well as these biographies on people.
How has the process changed you?
A lot, because it made me deal with some of the prejudice and racism that I was pretending like didn't exist. And when I started the project, I didn't want to make a story about racism, but unfortunately that was something that he had to deal with, and that's a big part of his story. And whether I was pretending like it was happening or not, it's a part of my story.
Yeah.
And so that's changed a lot. And it changed a lot where my director of photography was like, look, Veronica, if you want to tell this story, you have to be a part of it, because you are like directly involved with this story. This man who started his career in the 40s is one of the people responsible for starting the show that you like worked so hard to be in, and that you interacted with him, and you had no idea who he was. No one bothered to tell you how amazing this man was and what his contributions were. And when I met him, I had no idea that he was a circus person. I had not met any other African-American circus performers until I joined UniverSOUL Circus. So he's a part of this huge history that a lot of circus historians, a lot of African-Americans, a lot of American people don't know about. And so I've just changed so much, and I've accepted, just in general, I'll just put it like this, I've accepted the history of America and how it's affected everyone, not just African Americans, but like whatever is going on in society is going to be reflected in the circus. Circus is not an escape from reality in some respect. It can be, but it kind of popped my little circus bubble that I thought I was in.
Yeah.
So a lot of changes.
Well, and also I feel like, I mean, UniverSOUL is so reflective and so positive of a very specific community. Mm-hmm. Do you know?
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's kept them alive. Like, you go into a UniverSOUL circus tent and it's packed like to the brim.
It's so good.
Of people dancing and singing and swaying. It's like its own culture. It is an experience when you go in there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's so necessary. It's so necessary to have it.
Where do you see, I mean, moving forward, the future of African Americans and African American circus?
Wow. There's so many like incredible artists coming out, like that the new generation of like circus performers that are like 18, 19, 20, like even 25, like just first off, circus right now is just so like incredible. Like it's this super hybrid, like even if you do traditional circus, like it's this super hybrid of like movement and like artistry now. And people, the public now, they're saying like, we don't want to see animals anymore. And with, I swear, if like one more person has an accident by falling from the sky, people are gonna want us in safety lines. They're not gonna care. Like American people are really getting involved in circus, and they don't want to see high risk, like bone breaking stuff anymore. They don't want to see animals. So like the circus artists that are emerging now are getting so innovative and like so creative, and it's not just trick like straightforward. And with circus studios popping up everywhere, with everyone being affected by circus nowadays, what I think will happen is that just like gymnastics or just like ballet, there'll be a lot more little Black girls and boys that like go to these places to train.
Yes.
And not just for recreational, but some of them will have this spark, and they'll be an innovator, And so I just feel like with circus moving to a place where it's more accessible to everybody, it's just going to get like more inclusive, even more inclusive. And it's not that it wasn't inclusive before, it's just that not everyone had access to it before.
Yeah. And I mean, like, also with colorblind casting on TV shows, or with more representation in media of people, like you were of people of color, like you were saying, circus is a microcosmic reflection of society, and when you have that in other entertainment, why not see it on the stage in circus as well?
Yeah, I hope I hope that could happen more. I kind of feel like, companies that shall remain nameless, the long and lean kind of, either you're 5 foot to 5'3" and you're you have a tiny body and you're a flyer, or you're like 5'5", 5'6", long and lean.
Yeah.
Ballet features. I feel like that phase is kind of passing. So I hope to just see like a more variety in body types and just a little bit more freedom in casting. The show that's doing that the best right now is Zumanity. They revamped the show, I guess, a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And what you see is, you see everything because it's Zumanity.
Yeah.
But, you see everything. There's not just a one body type cast. There's not just a one of anything. You see this beautiful, display of people and body types and colors. It's just, that is the most, right now, for me, as far as, casting, that's the most innovative and creative show.
Cirque du Soleil is doing it.
Yeah, Zumanity,
Yeah.
And they kind of have to with a show like Zumanity. You're talking about sexuality. It's not just one thing. So you have to, you can't just put ballerinas.
Right, you can't just put a female-male adagio act.
Yeah.
Pretty white people and call it a day. You really do want to explore those
So
things.
they really took that show to the next level. And if you're of age, I would really suggest that you guys go see that. It's really intense and intensely beautiful, and all of the great intense things.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Anything else? Draw to a close.
Right?
Do you have any final stuff? I have my final question, which I ask everyone.
Yes.
Do you know it since
No.
you've been listening to the podcast?
No.
Okay. So my final question that I always ask every guest: what advice would you give to yourself at the very beginning of your career?
My advice, and I think everybody listen up here.
Yeah.
Because I think this is happening a lot with circus now being so social media heavy. I would say to myself is, make sure that you're doing this for yourself, not for your coaches, not so that people will like you, but make sure that what you're doing makes you happy and that you feel comfortable. Because earlier in my career, I was so eager to change my apparatus, and I was excited and eager to do whatever producers asked me to do. And so I was hopping from apparatus to apparatus, and I was stressing my body out. And I was putting myself and my body at risk. And it wasn't until after 2012 where I actually stopped myself and realized that I was training and performing. Some parts of me were doing this, or in this game as an artist, so that I would be accepted by people. And that was real. That was a real thing. And I had to dig deep inside and figure out who I am, or what void was there that needed to be filled for myself. And I realized what it was for myself. But I would just say, make sure that you're doing this for yourself. Make sure that you find joy and excitement in what you're doing, and that you're creating from a place of love and from your own passion, not someone else's. And I feel like I've become a better artist because of that. And I want to just say that to everyone listening that is inspired by circus and that wants to create, and that either recreational, or if you want to go to a high level, or if you find yourself in that annoying spot, which a lot of my students do, between being an amateur and then making that decision where you want to quit your job maybe and become professional. I see so many people in the gym training because they want other people to watch them, and while you're doing that, that adds stress to your training, because you're not if you mess up on something once, which you should be doing because you're in training,
right, you're not on stage.
Yeah, you get embarrassed, and you're looking around the room, you're looking around the studio, you're looking around the gym oh, did anyone see me? I hope not. And it's no. It's a process. That's what being an artist is, and you should be taking joy in all of it, even the mistakes, and not worrying about whether people like what you're doing or think you're badass enough. That's all.
That's awesome. Thanks, Veronica.
Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, sweet. And for sure, like as the Uncle Junior project and as more of your work continues, I will make it a personal project to like keep my listeners updated as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
and just,
super important.
Can I just do like a plug?
Yeah, plug on.
So we need to update the site because there was no media on there. So I need to like check with Vimeo real quick. But
yeah, I was gonna call you out on that, but like, maybe we cut this out of the show.
No, we don't have to. It is what it is. You know me. So you can go to www.theunclejuniorproject.com and you can check out the videos that will be up on there on the site. Also, we do have a Facebook page which you can go and like. That really, really matters nowadays. Like the more you follow something, the more you like something, even if you don't really feel like interacting with it, the more that a project or, something that you love goes up in numbers, the easier it is for a project to get funding. So you can definitely go to the Facebook page and like it. And there are videos out there that you can check out. But in the meantime, I will make sure that my site is working.
Yeah, beautiful. And if you just Google Uncle Junior Project, like the trailer from 2017, which is great, by the way. Really like it.
Yeah. Okay,
it's really nice.
Yes.
And you can see that it's like the first thing that comes up.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
do that.
And it is like, yes.
Sweet.
Please do that and please support. We are umbrellaed by Fractured Atlas. So you can also find us on Fractured Atlas and make a donation if you want, if you're inspired to do that. And if you just want I've done a 3-month exhibition on Blacks in American Circus. I've done a talk at the Smithsonian last year for Folk Life Festival. So I am available to do talks on Blacks in American Circus and an exhibition if you wanna fund that. So please just contact me if you have any questions about the Uncle Junior project.
Amazing.
Yay.
Thanks, Veronica.
Thank you.
That was my interview with Veronica Blair. I'm so grateful that she came on the show. She is doing such important work with the Uncle Junior project. It's such an important topic. As Veronica said at the very beginning, that little soundbite, circus is not just entertainment. It's a microcosmic reflection of society at large. And a truth about society at large for a very long time, since we started recording time, is that the ability to write history, the privilege to write history, belongs to the victors, the majority. And the stories of those who are not in the majority often get lost or overlooked or not even regarded as important to record. But they are absolutely important. And it seems a bit odd to sit here and break down why a human being's story being told would be important, because it has inherent value, just because life has inherent value, I believe. But Uncle Junior's story, on top of being inherently valuable because he's a human being, is a story of incredible resilience. This is a man who walked into the circus ring every single day in front of an audience that wanted him to die, in front of audiences that were filled with hate. And I'm not sure most performers could handle that. Just like Veronica talked about in her story, how crushed she was after spending years training with the best in France and in Florida, and then going out on stage in Atlanta and being thought of as a stripper. Not that strippers aren't also human beings who deserve our love and respect, but to be misrepresented in that way was incredibly hurtful to her. And I couldn't imagine being booed off stage, or if I was performing 35 feet up in the air and all the audience was doing was chanting for me to fall. How could you get back up on stage after that? Why would you want to continue? And yet Uncle Junior did. He not only survived those audiences, he thrived and was the go-to man to build circuses around the country. For more information about the Uncle Junior Project, you can visit www.theunclejuniorproject.com. Find them on Facebook at The Uncle Junior Project, and follow Veronica Blair on Instagram at Veronica_Blair_Aerialist. For training tips and other information about The Artist Athlete, I'm always on Instagram at _artist_athlete. My website is www.theartistathlete.com. And you can help this podcast continue by becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/theartistathlete. Next week on the podcast, I have Dr. Emily Sherb to talk about her new book, Applied Anatomy of Aerial Arts. Talk at you then, guys.